Welcome to The Hill's Coronavirus Report. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Each day, we're interviewing consequential leaders and innovators in the battle against the coronavirus. The economic and employment shocks we're seeing in the United States right now are intense. But the COVID crisis has hit globally and has upended businesses and working families nearly everywhere. Small businesses here in the U.S., but also in Europe and Asia, Africa, Latin America, they're innovating and working to adapt as more of our business and lives are happening digitally than ever before, and that's by a long shot. For example, according to a CNBC SurveyMonkey Workplace Happiness Survey, 38% of Americans like their jobs more now that they can work at home on digital platforms through Zoom and Skype and more like we're doing here today. But for small businesses and their workers and others to operate at home, a giant leap forward in the digital economy is going to require much safer identity protection and much more trust in financial and digital environments. One of the firms that sits at the nexus of small business, of entrepreneurship, of retail commerce, and high trust environments that works all over the world is Mastercard. My guest today has been called a passionate advocate of stakeholder capitalism. He believes if corporations have a people-first mindset, coupled with financial inclusion, we might come out better on the other side of this pandemic. Ajay Banga is president and CEO of Mastercard, a member of its board of directors. He joins me now. Ajay, thank you so much. I thought what would be helpful in our conversations on this horrible virus is to give a sense to our viewers right now of what's happening globally. What does that dashboard look like from your perspective?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I would say that this is truly a public health crisis. And I think there's a lot of work going on that front. But don't forget that the authorities have moved really well on fiscal and monetary policy in most countries around the world. I think we've all learned our lesson from prior financial crises and have applied at least a good lexicon out of those. Now, how well all that gets implemented and executed over a period of time will determine how well we come out of this over the next period. But the fact is, the playbook is operating. Now, the way we've defined the stages of this crisis for the company and for our investors and every employee is we've said there are four stages. And the first stage is containment. That's kind of, shutting down, borders getting shut, schools getting shut, restaurants shutting, everything shutting, people getting locked into their homes. Obviously, consumer spending falls off a cliff during that period. The second phase is stabilization. And stabilization is basically the bottoming out of the prior phase. It's almost like we're turning the corner and the curves of new cases and hospitalizations and ICU admissions are beginning to bend down, and people are beginning to buy not just everyday groceries, but also adding on a few things like home improvement and the like. And so I would say that till a couple, 3, 4 weeks ago, the United States and Europe were more or less operating through that bottom, that stabilization phase. China, on the other hand, which had entered containment before all of us, was coming into the third phase, which, for want of a better word, we call normalization. It's not really normal in the sense that not everything will go back to pre-COVID kind of level. It's actually lower than pre-COVID-19, but it's coming off the bottom. And you probably won't get the same recovery in long distance travel or in mass entertainment, but you will in pent-up demand for certain things. And it could be something as simple as hair and beauty treatments or gym memberships, or, like I said, home improvement, and maybe intra-regional travel or domestic travel, or, as I say recently, rural is the new urban for tourism in the US as well. People will drive to nearby hotels to give themselves that weekend treat that they have wanted. So you'll see that now in the US and Europe, we feel like for the last few weeks, we're entering into that normalization phase. And then the fourth phase really will come called growth, which will come pre-COVID kind of levels. I think that's going to need a vaccine, things that build back consumer confidence and business confidence to what it felt like prior to COVID-19. I would say nobody's back at that space yet, obviously, and it's not linear. Some countries have moved from containment to stabilization to normalization and have gone backwards. That's happened for a little while for Japan and Singapore when there was a resurgence of the virus in their countries. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. I would say the US and Europe, remember, now into normalization early stages. I would say China well into normalization, other countries going back and forth. And that's kind of where it feels like we are right.
Fascinating answer to that, and thank you for breaking that down that way. You know, it occurs to me that MasterCard is a vehicle to measure a lot of things, that you get a sense of how constricted things are, you get a sense of how relaxed and comfortable people will get, as you said, back into a more normalized environment. And to me, a lot of that is about trust, getting the trust equities right along the way. And right now, we have a lot of connected people and very little trust. And part of that is finance, part of that is everything else. Do you have insights into how a financial instrument can help contribute to returning to higher trust environments?
Yeah, well, so there are multiple parts to that question. I would say let's break that down into two portions, right? Let's first break it down into trust per se. And then let's just talk about how do you manage trust in this digital first kind of environment. So let's talk trust per se. Trust, you know, I mean, let's discuss different economies around the world and the trust they had with each other. The fact is, even before the crisis, multilateral institutions that we created in the last century were created to enable economies to operate on a platform that generated trust by the outside interpretation of those rules by third parties who were meant to be impartial. Now, we've seen those very multilateral institutions over the last decade or two slowly begin to break down from their level of operation prior to that. And so I would argue that they already wore down the trust environment between economies on a number of the issues. I think this thing has just exacerbated that. And so to me, at the end of the day, coming out of this, you look at the United States, what's our strength? Our strength is human capital, and our strength is our innovation and ingenuity and economies of scale, which allow us to benefit from an open trading environment. And if we don't manage and nurture our human capital, and if we don't manage and nurture an open trading environment, level playing field, not an open trading environment where we operate with both hands tied behind our back, but a level playing field, open trading environment, then I think we can be leaders in the space of helping to rebuild this trust across the polity of nations to make sure that we can keep an open trading system going. The fact is, the last 20, 30 years, the growth in the world's economies would not have happened. The reduction in poverty would not have happened without an open trading environment. And so the United States is vested in that and in leadership in human capital. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah.
And I think we shouldn't really back off that completely. Now, in the digital space, trust is a very much more interesting conversation. I think it starts with being careful about your identity, about individual consumers feeling safe about their identity online. And that leads to the whole conversation about digital identities that are secure with distributed platforms, cybersecurity efforts, that whole space. But I think way beyond that is the whole issue of ethical innovation. If you're going to use artificial intelligence, if you're going to use data for the right purposes of giving consumers and businesses better service, it is really important that you put the consumer and the business first. It's really important that you say to a consumer, this is your data. You deserve to benefit from it. You have the right to be forgotten. You have the right to have it deleted. And you must be able to feel safe when your data is being used by others. I think that kind of principles, simple principles on data, something we call our data responsibility principles, our data imperative that we've issued a little while ago. I think we really need to embrace all that when we go forward in this world of 5G and IoT and interconnected devices to rebuild the trust that's going to be important in this coming decade.
Thank you for that. One of the things I just want to ask just very quickly, because I've been fascinated by digital IDs and that question of how to get there for a long time,
Right.
and how to make it safe and also make it something that can't be exploited. We have a lot of policy people watching this show. What do you need to have to make that happen, to make that more of a reality than we've got right now?
Great question. So So, Steve, the fact is that if you have a digital ID where the government controls every aspect of that identity, most economies like ours will feel uncomfortable with that situation. Citizens in a country like ours, in parts of Europe, and a number of other countries around the world, are uncomfortable having the government be the be all and the end all of everything to do with you. Yet, the government gives you a driving license. They give you a passport. Your banks have information about you when you opened an account with them for know your customer, for anti-money laundering. Your cell phone company has information, but there you are because of me having a GPS tracker. So the best form of digital identity to me is a distributed platform where companies do not keep all that information with them, neither does the government. Instead, you, the consumer, empower this trusted identity system to say, hey, can you prove to so and so I am Steve, or I am above the age of 18, or I am male, or whatever it is you wish to prove. And that trusted player can go into those distributed identity records and only bring back that information which is necessary to answer the limited question that you wanted to have answered. So let me expand on this with an example. Let's say you were buying alcohol on the web. And today, a lot of people are doing that in coronavirus times, right? Home purchases of alcohol are much higher than they used to be. Well, when they get delivered to your house, they have to make sure that you're an adult and you are the person who ordered the alcohol. So you've got to either sign for something, give them proof of identity. In some countries, you have to give them a driving license. And this young kid from a delivery company takes the photograph of your driving license. Now, on their phone is your photograph, your full name, your exact date of birth, of course, your address, they knew that, but sometimes also the vehicle you're allowed to drive, and of course, your driving license number. In a number of countries, that is enough information to open a bank account in your name. I'm saying don't do that. You only needed to prove you were above the legal age of drinking. You can do that by going into the driving license authority and bringing back the fact that Steve is above 21, going to the bank and having a second place to check it from, and then going to your cell phone operator and bring back the fact that you are physically where you claim to be. Put those 3 points together, and you can tell the delivery company, go ahead and deliver the booze. This is the guy who bought it. In fact, I give you back your privacy. I give you back your identity, but I prove to everybody in the ecosystem that you are who you are. That to me is the form of digital identity. Distributed databases, not centralized, no honeypot, which people would want to break into. And then a cooperative system where nobody owns everything, but you kind of go in and work on this together. We've actually built this and launched this in Australia already.
Oh, fascinating. I look forward to learning more about that. In our last couple of minutes, Ajay, I want to ask you about what you're seeing in small businesses. I wrote a piece for The Hill this week in which I reached out, just crowdsourcing on LinkedIn and Facebook, and said, for those people who have companies out there that are struggling, how have you innovated or how have you created a new business? And I got overwhelmed. I literally got hundreds of stories, which I wrote about some of them, about how people have moved. And I'm interested in what you're seeing in sort of the cash flow and the commerce side of small businesses, and what you're am I seeing something, not to quote the White House too much on it, am I seeing something that's anecdotal information, or is it turning out to be actually, there's a lot more dynamism in the small business sector than most of us are observing or aware of during this coronavirus?
Look, I think first of all, small business is the engine of growth of economies around the world, including in the US. And I think supporting them and finding ways to make them come out of this the right way is the single best thing we can all do for the economic vitality and, frankly, the social vitality of our economy. So I'm all in for that one. I would say they are also suffering. There is no doubt that a number of them have struggled and are struggling right now through this period. But there are those who are being innovative and creative, and they will come out in the natural process of this coming out of this situation. They will probably come out stronger. And it ranges from restaurants in Brooklyn who, being unable to be open, have now re-Christianed themselves trading posts. They are selling everything from wine out of their cellars to actually their own menus prepackaged and sold to people. They've changed who they are. There are others who are trying to find omni-channel experiences, and They were only physical earlier, and they've learned very quickly to go online and become digital as well. And people like us are helping them, not just us. There are many companies helping them in this space. I think the whole idea of small business being alive and innovative is definitely correct. But there are those who are being very challenged, and there are those who are managing better through this process. And we shouldn't forget either of them as we come out of this. And, Steve, we've set up a $250 million fund to help small businesses globally over these next few years. And part of that is by giving them free tools for cybersecurity scanning, to education on how to use credit, to different kinds of aspects. And the others are philanthropic donations to them to help them manage through this period. And a lot of companies are doing good things for small businesses for all the reasons we just talked about.
Well, Ajay, I want to thank you. I always learn from you when we have these discussions. Thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you one day in person again. That'll be fun. And I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I'm Steve Clemons. We'll see you tomorrow. Be well.